Well, a beautiful day here in Northern California. I'm Michael DiMartino, and you're tuning into Solutionaries. This is a opportunity that we take every week to drop in with different people doing amazing work, both here in our bioregion and watershed, but also around the world. And it's great to be back in California from Colorado, where I've been staying at the headwaters of the Rio Grande up in the Swatch County, Crestone, Colorado area. So it's nice to be back and happy to be here with one of our fellow board members in person, Penelope Flores, who can chime in if she'd like to share something, but we're just getting the show on the road. And also I want to welcome my fellow board member of Earthstock Foundation, Earthstock Enterprises, Bob Saunders, who's also one of the originators of the Water Protector Tour, which is a series of over 40 events we've done over the last 4 or 5 years to raise awareness in the watershed about privatization, about environmental toxins, and about a lot of the issues that have been happening. And also out of that, we midwifed the Sacramento River Watershed Project, which is basically a template that can be shared of how to organize people in a bioregion and watershed and deal with one of the most pertinent issues in our age, the idea of water privatization, commodification, and the toxins that are added to that. So I do want to welcome before we get right to our guest, I want to welcome Mr. Bob Saunders, if you'd like to share a word, and then we're going to introduce our guest today, Harry Eldridge. So Bob Saunders, you there?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad to be here, and thank you, Michael, for hosting this, and welcome our guest Harry, and let Harry speak because I'm very interested in hearing what he has to say.
Great. With no further ado, we get right down to it. We don't spend a lot of time on chit chat, but it is nice to have these discourses to keep it human and not be overly agenda driven. So with that, we're going to welcome to Solutionaries, episode number 4, Harry Eldridge, who is an environmental advocate and recreationalist, and I've gotten an opportunity to get to know him. And again, welcome to the show, Harry, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your interests and activities around being an advocate.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to the show. I moved back here from Sonoma County in 2019, early 2019. That was my original immersion in the earth and the tribe out here in Northern California. Got there in 1980, started running outdoor programs for the YMCA at a summer camp called Spring Lake. So we had access to Annandale State Park. And without going through all of my professional experience, I think the nugget I've seen through 30 years of either leading summer camps, putting in school gardens, working as a counselor in mental health, and teaching in schools is that when people have a somatic relationship with the earth, when they actually get woven like this, that relationship doesn't go away. It's an intrinsic relationship. It really reveals what's precious, and it's much harder to drift into well, I'll just say the narcotic of distraction, okay? There's always time for looking at other options in life. That's fine. There's a couple of other items on the menu, but when you have a menu with 200 items, you don't know which ones really matter anymore. And I find that that's a pretty widespread challenge for a lot of people. I came through it myself, scholar athlete, thought I needed to know about all these subjects. And as you get older, you see how the lost and found department work together. To some degree, you got to get lost to be found, but you don't have to stay lost. So I got lost in that menu with 200 items for a while, but I always had this somatic relationship with the ground that kept me grounded, kept me involved. So I grew up in Tucson, was there from 62 to 67, from the time I was 4 to 9, at a big lot, empty lot behind my house. I hung out with lizards, ants, desert plants, definitely probably 5 or 6 hours on the weekend, a couple hours, on the weekdays. And I had a father and a mother that really rewarded being curious and being awake. Matter of fact, it was a requirement in our family, okay? And then having some good mentors in my life, my own personal life. My son was born in 92. down in a small town called Cambria, which is Central Coast, north of San Luis Obispo. And his birth was definitely connected to the clairvoyance. And again, that weave that came out of my experience in Cambria, where I built a shelter out of a windblown tree. I lived out for 6 months. I overwintered, and talk about informing my body on a different level, where you get transcendent with the Milky Way, but you're also present with the great horned owls right there. And so that was a great fertilization for me, and enhancement. And then I think individual integrity, and what I mean by that is just be who you are. Life is not a popularity contest. Take a stand, bring your truth, and know who your tribe is. I'll finish by saying, I've definitely done a lot of work as a pioneer, where I've been the grass amongst a lot of sidewalks and streets. And at this stage in my career, I value my tribe and my extended family a lot more. So it's nice meeting you guys.
Absolutely. And thank you some time to have this discourse with us, and really excited about not just the discourse, but also the potentiality based on our last conversation. I believe we had met possibly out in Sonoma, and I know we had talked a lot about the concept of water and water protection. Of course, growing up in Arizona, I'm sure you had a very extra accentuated, unique appreciation for water.
Sure.
But where do you live now?
I am in North Sacramento, and let me just interject with this question, Michael. Are you active in the Earth films coming out of Auburn? Was your name on the poster? You know that film
No,
festival
no,
they have? I was just wondering if maybe I called you off of that poster. Okay.
no. Actually, I do know the Wild and Scenic Film
Yeah, that's
Festival.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're based in Nevada City. I know of them, and actually currently, and we'll get into it, one of the projects that Bob and I are working on is about the privatization of water in the Sacramento River Watershed, primarily in the Sacramento Delta, which has not only the richest soil, but is really the aggregating spot for most of the water and the snowmelt from the Sierras, and really the cornerstone to California's water security. So we are working on a Solo the Delta film, but I haven't. I performed with their events. I've been involved in their events. I've done a lot of things, but we have not to this date submitted a film into the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. But we are synchronistically, as you just said, we are kind of working on that.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about my relationship with water and my passion for water. So, first off, just safe drinking water that tastes good. And then as you get older, you work with Environmental Working Group, Center for Food Safety. There's a lot of advocacy groups that give us a pretty good education about what's going on. So when I left Tucson, we moved to New Haven, Connecticut. I had multiple rivers within a couple hundred yards of the house. Went down there building my tree forts and everything.
I actually grew up on the Connecticut River just north of New Haven.
Where at?
Enfield, Connecticut.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I know where
Yeah.
Housatonic, Enfield, all those drainages. The Quinnipiac River was on one side. The Mill River was on the other side. And I actually wrote one of my papers, my first advocacy position, actually. I had come home from studying at the University of Lund in Sweden on an acid rain fellowship over there. And the town of New Haven, or town of North Haven, was proposing these new shopping malls right on the Quinnipiac River floodplain. And we got a bunch of us together and stopped it. And so that was my first direct advocacy. Here in Sacramento, where I'm at right now, North Sacramento, I can look over to the west. I'm 300 yards from some of the levees along some of the back channels that flow through here in Sacramento. It's definitely a sad portrait of how little people value waterways here. There's tons of trash and everything else. One thing I'd like to, possibly shepherd is getting this area cleaned up. Mm-hmm. And then when you look at your personal relationship with a river as a poem, whether it's the Sacramento River Watershed, whether it's back east, the Yuba, it's, I grew up in the scientific method, okay, but the poetry was always there. And so the kayaking, picnics at the river, and you just start to see that intrinsically you are the river. It's not just an externality, it's who you are. just like you are the sunset. You know, we have all these notes out here, the trees, the grass, the sunset, they're in us. And when you see that intrinsic relationship, it makes you come home.
Well, it's great hearing that too, because we have a terminology we use, artivists, people who are kind of activists or advocates, but they do it through art.
Yeah.
And also we have people like Bob who, and I'm going to let Bob share a little bit about his background. He comes from a long lineage of direct action, and also was involved with the California Guild and a lot of work. So Bob, you want to chime in and just share a little bit about yourself, and we can start to explore like connectivity of how this time we get to chat with each other might actually turn into rubber hitting the road and some action items. So I'm going to welcome back Mr. Bob Saunders.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Harry, for your interesting introduction and stuff. But I would say that you're not a direct advocate, you're a direct action activist, because if you stop something and took on the empire and you won, then you are clearly a direct action activist.
Yeah, that place still hasn't been built.
Well, yeah, so you
30 years,
just proved my
40
word.
years later.
Yep. And I know about the
Bob,
New Haven
Bob,
and the power plants and
Bob,
all that
can you
stuff.
put
there, too.
Bob, can you put your camera on, please?
Yeah, sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Definitely. Okay. Oh, is it on?
Yep,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
I was having some problems with this morning. Yeah, now I'm going to get to do my least favorite thing to do, talk about myself. I'd rather like speak through actions than talk about myself. But by the way, have you read my book? No, I'm kidding.
Can I buy you a t-shirt?
Here comes the infomercial.
Can I buy that t-shirt, Bob?
Yeah, that's true, and all the other trinkets that go with it. My background is it's interesting, and my family, I've got a direct link to a civil rights hero, and what do you call it, and the background into things like anti-war, civil rights.
Now you got to tell us who that was.
That was my third cousin on my father's side, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was best friend with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And he's in that famous photo on the march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. And, you know, the linking arms. He's right next to Ralph Bunche, who was the first Black, representative UN ambassador. And so all the famous people are right there. And in the wide photo, you'll see there's a priest, there's a nun. You had rabbis, nuns, priests, other representatives from different religions. I'm sure there was some, Muslim imam that was there as well, all backing civil rights, because in the 60s, it was like an awakening.
Are you there, Harry?
I'm there now. We lost it for a minute. I'm still here.
Okay. Yeah, maybe something happened with the bandwidth. So why don't we do this? I'm looking and he still is on the call. He might have had an issue with his camera freezing or something.
Okay.
So we'll invite Bob back. So let's explore, since we talked a little bit about our backgrounds, where we are right now, and with Solutionaries, we always like to provide tangible solutions. You know, there's so much what I call the information saturation generation out there. It's like so much information, but what do you do with all that? So since we're not putting all of this potentially on hard drives and doing a huge archive, we are archiving the conversation. We like to inspire people to actually walk away with something practical.
Yeah.
So currently, you know, Bob and I, again, with the Sacramento River Watershed Project, we're basically really focused bioregionally on water issues. And the biggest issues, again, are privatization, environmental toxins. And we're also looking at stuff around mismanagement, which gets into things like legislations. And what's really interesting, last week, I just interviewed Frank L. Curry, who's a senator who actually wrote a constitutional amendment to resist the horrific poisoning and encroachment of the coal mines in Pennsylvania. Right. So he's now actually on our team and wants to help us consult to do some potential constitutional amendments to the state constitution in California. He said, actually, strangely enough, California is one of the worst, but we can see, being kind of the breadbasket of the world and one of the largest, I think, 5th or 6th economies, and our dependency on water, how just over the last year, there's been the privatization, the commodification of water through the Chicago Exchange. So these are some of the issues that we're looking at. And what's nice is a lot of these issues are really solvable if people take their personal responsibility for their lifestyle and what they can contribute. And I think when we talked the other day, we talked about anything from our personal body care products to what we use in the home for cleansers, detergents, those types of things. Also, of course, landscaping is one of the worst.
Right.
And then we talk about industrial and petroleum-based agriculture, which of course is decimating surface water and the watersheds, which of course penetrate into our fossil and groundwater. And a lot of it is just changing the model, introducing new innovative practices. And so Bob and I, we do have a sizable amount of contacts, but as you know, this is a big problem and it takes teamwork to make the dream work. So now that we have an official Earthstock Foundation nonprofit, and I see, Bob, are you there?
Yeah, I got cut off and it unfortunately happens and got disconnected, but I'm back. Yeah.
We got you back, man.
All right, we want to go back to your story. I was just kind of bringing it to the current day here with Harry about what we're doing with the Sacramento River Watershed Project. And now it's an initiative of the Earthstock Foundation, how we have the Soul of the Delta film happening. And we're taking on a lot of the issues about privatization, which is a very hard nut to crack. And I know in a moment when you talk about your background, you were part of the Crunch Nestle Alliance. We've also gone up to Mount Shasta, where Crystal Geyser has been pulling 500 million bottles of water a day out of the Mount Shasta watershed, which is also a highly volcanic area. And California depends on those glacial waters along with the Sierras for its water supply and its agriculture, which is the key to our local economy. And we've also talked about things like what's happening with forever chemicals and the fire retardants that are being put into our water. And also the idea of, we recently had Frank L. Curry on the show, who did some constitutional amendments around protections of the water from coal mining in Pennsylvania. So we're building a lot of synergy and momentum, but as we know, it takes a tribe or a team. It takes teamwork to make the dream work. So right now we are looking to partner with a few other people. And in my conversation the other day with Harry, it seemed very apparent he has a lot of potentiality to bring to the table. So before we go back to where we are now, can you finish a little bit about some of your work around the Guild and Crunch Nestle, and we'll kind of bring us up to the current day?
Sure. Yeah. Two of the major activists and environmental areas I was involved in was Crunch Nestle Alliance. We shut down the Nestle water bottling plant in Sacramento 4 times. And, basically every time we cost them money. And then we went to the city council and would speak at the city council meetings and lobby to have them shut the plant down, or at least charge them, industrial rates, because essentially they were paying the same thing as homeowners were, or citizens in Sacramento, which is absurd. And we weren't against them using water to clean their machines and things like that. I mean, that's efficient. That's a necessity. It's a part of business. It was more so that they were charging, I believe it was, I think 67 cents for like a huge truckload of water, and then bottling and making something like upwards of like 1,000 to 1,200%. And the plastic bottles that they did, it was like a twofold problem, drawing an immense amount of water and at the same time producing a tremendous amount of plastic.
I know right where that plant is. I watched them build that thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. And so the history and where there were people fighting against it and everything. And then Mayor Kevin Johnson's number 2, the assistant chief of staff, actually a week after they built the plant opened, she went to work for them.
Oh wow.
So, and there was actually a very incestuous relationship between Mayor Johnson's office and the Chamber of Commerce, and going up to McLeod, who kicked out Nestle up there and said, why don't you come down to Sacramento and they gave them a sweetheart deal. I mean, it was like a really, and I called them out on that when I would write press releases and a white paper and things like that. And actually even did at City Hall, even though, you know, by then Kevin Johnson, well, yeah, he was still there. Well, excuse me. He often missed meetings.
Right.
And it wasn't because we were going to be there. It's like, you know, he was like an absentee mayor in a lot of ways. So he did his job. He brought the king, you know, kept the Kings in Sacramento. You know, that's all they cared about. But anyway, so it was really hard, you know, and I've told people before, once you build a plant, it's very hard to get rid of them. I mean, you're up against a major corporation, you know, a major economic octopus. You stop them. So you guys in Connecticut did a fabulous job. And like you said, to this day, it hasn't been built yet. We went up to a lot of us, Crunch Nestle Alliance people. We went up to Mount Shasta. We helped the people up there. And finally, they kicked out Crystal Geyser. They're in a neighboring town where they've had a plan for a number of years, but they did not build it in Mount Shasta. It would have devastated the watershed had they done it. I mean, it would have, you know, it would have increased the amount of water they were draining every single day. And they already had a problem a couple of years ago when Coca-Cola was the bottling plant up there, that essentially it destroyed the wells. Right. And so, you know, there was really nothing. They would have left them hung them out to dry. And the typical thing Nestle's and all these and Crystal Guys and everybody does, when they drain an aquifer and there's no more water for them to profit from, they leave town. Yeah. And
well, it's just like the oil companies in South America and the Nigerian Delta. It's all the same principle.
Well, the only difference is that I always say is that they kill people there if they protest or get in the way. They haven't figured out a way to get away with that in this country. You know, same thing with Monsanto. I mean, you know, it's pretty egregious what they do overseas, but because the government's in cahoots a lot of times with them, in a sense, you know, in truth, they are here too, but it's in a different way. So long as you pay your taxes or you pay something or you get somebody elected, we'll leave you alone. You know, there, as we know, the situation in Southern California and San Bernardino Mountains, and basically where they're draining, Nestle's been operating now. I think it's, when the story came out, it was 27 years without renewing a permit. And now it's, what is it, 4 or 5 years later, they're still doing it. Right. You know, all that publicity, it made it all around the world, you know, they're still doing the same thing. And what we did with Monsanto, we shut Monsanto down 7 or 8 times. And my joke is we did such a wonderful job driving their stock down that they got bought up by Bayer. Right. You know, so it's like we have the twin towers of greed and evil working together now. And I'm going, you know, so the key thing is, how do you stop them? And the truth is, you stop them before they really get started, gain a foothold. That to me is really, and that's hard for a lot of people. And the other part is, if you need to, you know, you can risk arrest. If you get arrested, you go to court. That's your other platform. We got arrested at Monsanto one time having a sit-in. We went to court. Not only did we beat Monsanto and what do you call it, the law enforcement and the DA's office there, we also won a First Amendment rights case, which, as you know, in this country, when we were in jail, a friend of mine said to me, oh, Bob, you know what we're going to do? We're going to basically take on Monsanto, and we're going to put Monsanto on trial. And I said, Andy, we're going to do one more thing. We're going to put the First Amendment on trial. We're going to find out if we have one or not. Right. And I said, it's under siege in this country. And I said, we didn't do anything illegal. And what we found out in the course of the trial, I did research, found out that we were actually had our sit-in. We were lined up 10 people in a row on the easement, which legally you were allowed to do. Wow. It was just amazing. So it's like, so, and then I shared information with another group, some people from Black Lives Matter, white and Black folks who got arrested having a sit-in at City Hall, and they won a First Amendment rights case too. Yeah. And that to me is really one of the most important things. When you have something and you're doing something and it works, you need to collaborate with other people. Yep. I mean, because, you know, it's not just an assault in environmental areas or environmental rights. It's also civil rights. It's social justice. Right. It's everything. And that, in a sense, is what Michael and I are taking on and working on, because we're under assault in so many different ways. I mean, you know.
And one of our big approaches too, Bob, is just to share this with Harry. Even though we're not afraid to, take on private interests, that we're also about bridge building. So part of our work has been about creating a coalition. The Sacramento River Watershed is a coalition of individuals, organizations, and nonprofits, along with members of tribes, and also sometimes decision makers and leaders in government. So when we look at the issues in our watershed of privatization, which is a huge nut to crack and take on, we look at also mismanagement of resources and the lack of people having their birthright access to clean water and the mismanagement part. But we also talk about environmental toxins. One of the areas that we've actually had success is around environmental toxins. A couple of years ago, we did our water protector tour up in Mount Shasta. At that point, I met with the mayor of Mount Shasta who came to the event, and I talked to her saying, how many times a week or a month do you spray Roundup in the park, and what other pesticides do you do, and what other chemicals do you use, and even gasoline powered landscaping equipment, how much do you use, and do you know that that's actually affecting the water, not just here in the park where people are going to this supposedly pristine spring and drinking, which is right beneath the train tracks, which also Caltrans and the train systems use tons of herbicide and things like that to get rid of the weeds. But people go there to bottle water right from the source of the spring, and that the water is actually contaminated right there at the source. And she actually kind of had an epiphany, because it's interesting. A lot of people just don't know any better. So within a few months after that, actually, they passed a local ordinance to stop using the weed killers around the headwaters of the spring in Mount Shasta. So again, I do think, we're very, actually our motto is preservation, education, and regeneration. So that's a big part of but we have to build bridges. I mean, just being against what's wrong doesn't always work. It's a nice way to wake up people about, well, these are issues that affect all of us, regardless of social class, economic level. But again, a big part of it is, helping to build these bridges. So,
and be solutionaries. Find solutions.
We spoke on the theme the other day, me and Mike,
Yeah.
just about being solutionaries.
Right.
And that the versus is part of the equation. But when you spend too much time against, right, it robs you of building these bridges, because there is commonality. And so you find your own balance in terms of how you stand and how you do your work. Interestingly enough, I Googled an advocate I've known for 30 years, since I got here to Sacramento in '93. His name is Patrick Porgans. I'll send you a link to his work. So he's an independent investigator who's been investigating the whole Bay Delta schmooze going on for 30 years. And I talked to Patrick the other night. He's in his 60s now, late 60s. And with his permission, I'll forward you his info. So his name of his company, I'd forgotten, is Planetary Solutionaries. And he's had this company for 35, 40 years. And it's just another evidence of people doing the work, and we need to band together, and we need to take this work and work together.
So on that note, I do want to say Bob and I do have a email and a website, but we also have a Telegram channel specifically for Sacramento River Watershed. And even though Bob and I kind of midwife that together, Bob is kind of really taking on the baton, because even though he's on the board and he helps to oversee and do decision making at a high level, it's really important that we start to build out these committees. So what I'm implying today as a potential action item is, we'd love to get you on the Telegram channel, and we need to start building out this committee, and not that we're asking people for a ton of time or energy, but let's build up a round table of different people who can, hold on one second.
Yeah.
Let's build up a team of people who can act as educators and consultants and especially now with the nonprofit, we have the ability to get grants and be crowdfunding. We're actually looking at in January doing a crowdfunding campaign to raise funds to finish the Soul of the Delta film. So again, building out such an essential, and it's interesting, as Bob and I travel around with the Sacramento River Watershed Project, people want to get excited and engaged, but after the impulse wears off, it's kind of like, where do we go from here? So a couple things. We are doing a World Water Day event on March 22nd. We did it last year with over 60 presenters over 2 days from countries all over the world. We are going to be doing that. We are going to be doing our big Water Palooza event to raise more awareness in the Delta. It looks like it's going to be the weekend after Memorial Day, which this year, Memorial Day is the last weekend of May, which seemed kind of odd to me. So we're looking at the first week of June, and we're going to be partnering with people from 2 other watersheds who are both tied to local county government that do river cleanups and stuff. So I think if we take this time today to kind of initiate this relationship and onboarding, and I do want to say, you know, the way the Watershed Project works, even though Bob and I do a lot of organizational stuff, and Bob also does press releases, and we have people that Bob works with, and we have, I put articles sometimes in magazines and different things. I mean, we actually have a functioning campaign. It will take potentially another half dozen people to really bring together the different elements. And again, I want to identify Frank L. Curry, who has been willing to write us a state constitutional amendment around the protections of water. So that's something super exciting waiting to be actualized. We have the Soul of the Delta film. And then the last piece is Bob and I have been working on doing a huge, eventually from the glacial waters to the Delta, but doing some test pilots of doing some water remediation projects using mushrooms, biochar, and there's also a couple new technologies that actually use frequencies. It can sound a little esoteric to actually do water remediation. And a lot of that is through creating structured water, which once you put structured water into regular water, the structuring of that water actually brings things back into a natural balance around pH and oxygen levels. So there's a lot of exciting stuff, but as you can tell, you know, Bob and I trying to orchestrate all that and also run a foundation, which is trying to bring in funds, can be a very daunting task. So I guess, you know, I want to
from the ground up.
Right. And also we have to be able to straddle what the many water agencies that are out there. I can't remember how many, it's something like 10, 16 or whatever, that, you know, everybody's got their little piece of the pie. Some of them, I'm sure, we'll have to do, you know, we're not above, of course, reaching out to them and everything, because the key thing is we can't automatically write off those agencies and stuff, because those agencies have a tremendous amount of power and influence. Right. So if we can sell them, that's the positive part of, if you're against this, what are you for? You always have to have some kind of solution to something to offer them, you know, and that's better than that, cost effective, you know, et cetera, like that. And, you know, and that's what essentially part of the things that we work on. And we find some really good people like yourself that that are very knowledgeable and aware of it, that want to help implement some of these changes that are so necessary.
Yeah, my buddy Patrick is very well seasoned over these 40, 45 years. I'll definitely link him up with us. And then one thing that comes up to me, just as something so it's available for the public, is just getting measuring equipment in stations along the Sacramento River. So we know what DO levels are in certain areas. So we know what toxic levels are, okay? And that these are monitoring stations, you know, every 4 or 5 miles. We had a salmon die off. I was talking to a guy from the Puda Creek Watershed Association yesterday. There's been a bunch of salmon dying off, you know, inside the bypass because of low DO. And so, you know, having some data available, I'm going to give you back the microphone, Mike.
And also the algae blooms. And I will say this, one thing that does make the Sacramento River Watershed Project unique is, you know, Bob and I are very collaborative. Part of the issue I find, like in Nevada County where I live, there's over 300 nonprofits. And there's a lot of competition, like, oh, you're doing water stuff, we're doing water stuff. And there's a lot of people that are jockeying to get the financial support. And by trying to do that, they're kind of competitive against other organizations doing similar work. And the other big problem is a lot of times some of these boards, and I'm not, dissing nonprofits and stuff, they have a huge staff and board of a lot of paid people where a very small amount of money goes actually into the cause. And, it's kind of like the bureaucracy of how much to push papers around. And we understand that. But Bob and I will say, I actually work with a Sierra Streams Institute, which is a water testing and monitoring company. And I'm going to drop some of these names so we have this on the recording. I also work with Kramer Engineering that does water testing around pesticides, insecticides. I also, there's actually a app called Casper, which is put up by the Department of Environmental Protection, where people can report abuses like the overuse of pesticides and different things. So, and not only that, we've actually created a thing called the Source Directory, which is a bioregional regenerative resource. So again, this is what, Bob and I and a small team of people have been able to actualize in just a few years. But right now, we really do need to find what we would call a roundtable of collaborative people, a think tank, and start implementing some stuff. And
let me ask you guys a quick question.
Sure.
So we went to level 3, which is tertiary treatment at the water treatment plant in Sacramento, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. It's made a big difference in water quality downstream coming up from level 2. I don't know. We had some definite water quality problems before this change, and they had to raise a lot of bonds and stuff like that. I don't know if it's mostly level 2 as we go up the watershed. I'm assuming it's secondary treatment for most towns. That's just another tributary to include in our discussions, what these municipalities can do to improve their treatment.
Absolutely. And I think part of that too is, Harry, is we could find organizations that are doing it and form functional, collaborative, and synergistic partnerships, because, this is a lot to take on, but it also takes Bob working with potentially another kind of like a co-director to help implement this. And then especially when funds come in, like where do we want to divert funds to the nonprofit? And again, we do have some immediate things coming up. And also, as I was telling you, we have a World Water Channel. It tends to be more global,
right?
But nonetheless, we're meeting a lot of people around the world who are dealing with similar issues. Our call last week was definitely. We had 15 people on the call from 7 countries, someone from Bosnia, someone from Germany, someone from South America, someone on the call actually was from West Africa. And people have different types of problems, but the idea is we have voicesofwater.com, which is a world water channel that Bob, myself, and Elizabeth Harold started. And okay, we want to create global change, but we have to start in our watershed. So we're really looking at bioregionalism. And the whole model is how to build a roundtable of citizens and, again, organizations to work together as opposed to being divisive. So I'm really excited about talking with you. You also said that you're a writer. And you also said that the potentiality of helping to, benefit from the use of the nonprofit to write grants. We also have some very high level advisors that worked on like Green Festival, one of the co-founders of Earth Day, that we can partner with and draw on their advisorship. But as you know, it takes people to do things. So I want to just continue to explore the potential connectivity. But I think getting, if you're not already on Telegram, getting you on a Telegram channel with Bob on the watershed and starting to invite people in and building out that team, hopefully to kind of culminate in a World Water Day, March 22nd event. And then the Water Palooza, where we can bring in people from all over the region. Last year we did it at the Ride Hotel, which is right in the heart of the Delta. And we had a couple of days of music. We went out to, some of the farms. And this year we're trying to bring a little more teeth to it. So it's entertainment, but it's educational, but it's also like, again, we have to organize and strategize, and we actually have to implement. Because again, every day I hear so many people talking about things, but it's like it kind of stays in the etheric. It doesn't land. And I know Bob and I are both production people and nuts and bolts people, and now we have an incredible team of people on the foundation that can actually treasurer and secretary, and we're going after resources to help channel into this. And really right now with the foundation, besides creating this project called ARC, which are getting facilities to start these alliances for regenerative communities, which is part of my work in Colorado right now, is the watershed project. Sacramento River Watershed Project is really it. You know, we can think globally, but we have to initiate and do stuff locally. So
Michael, is ARC an acronym or is that the actual name?
it's an actual name and an acronym. It's called the Alliance for Regenerative Communities.
Okay.
And basically, just to give you a quick background, because I really do want to hear from you, and I know, I could go on for a while. And also I'm here with our treasurer. We're doing some work today. Penelope Flores, and she came up from the Georgetown area. But I started a thing in Nevada City like 5 years ago called was the Alliance for Resilient Communities, because resilience is a big thing about emergency preparedness, food and water security. And then I realized that, resilience and sustainability and the preservation work is all part of a bigger thing of this whole emergence of regenerative culture. How do we preserve what we have? How do we educate the public? But how do we regenerate and remediate that which is broken? And it goes on every level. So we had a 16 office building. We had populated it with filmmakers and artists, with various organizations. We were doing weekly productions and media. I did 4 years of television broadcasting. We had local meetings. Anyways, I actually, because of COVID and the 2 years of the close down, I actually moved out and we let it kind of disintegrate, because part of that was like, we went from the Alliance for Resilient Communities to the Alliance for Regenerative Communities. So to be very clear, we are working on implementing one in Colorado and one here in Nevada City. And then our secretary, head of communications, Rachel, is working on one to do in Los Angeles. She's also part of Green LA. So that's one thing, is getting facilities to bring communities and organizations together into think tanks and incubators and roundtables. The other project we're really doing is right here in our own watershed. We have to clean up our water. And just to add to that, another issue is here in Nevada County, Nevada Irrigation District, every year, several times a year, puts tons of Roundup along the banks of 450 miles of irrigation canals. And they also put cutrine, a copper-based heavy metal, into the irrigation canals, and are basically destroying the watershed, poisoning the community in their attempt to, and that's why we say mismanagement, when there's other more organic ways to actually do that. So, when we put all these things together, like, let's deal with the contamination issue right now. Again, personal body products, home cleansers, landscaping products. And we work with Kathleen Halal and Rachel Linden from Non-Toxic Communities that have been hugely successful, passing ordinances in counties and communities saying stop using poisons on our lawns and our waters and on our schools and children, and making a difference. So to me, the real quick low-hanging fruit is really the environmental toxins piece. Like, we can make a difference, and then when people see that, we start to remediate it. And then from there, really starting to take on the real juggernaut of the privatization, which, as Bob knows, is a much more harder nut to crack. So I just want to put that out. And before we get towards finishing, because we like to keep these short as possible so they're digestible and we don't lose people, to get your feedback of what you're thinking and again, how you would like to move forward from here, and other solutions and ideas you might have.
Well, before we go on, Bob, let me just get your email while we're together. I have Michael's. Give me your email, Bob.
It's RSAUND3980@AOL.com.
Okay, I'm going to repeat that. So RSAUND3980 was the number, correct?
Yes.
3980@AOL.com.
Yeah, you can also get me at the Sac River Watershed Project at gmail.com.
Yeah, I've got
SAC River Watershed Project. You probably have that from Michael too.
Yes,
Yeah, good.
And Mike, how would I set up that Telegram page?
And we do have a website. All you have to do is you just have to get the Telegram app on your computer. I'll see you pop up on it. It's encrypted and it's free. And then once I see you pop up, oh, okay, Harry Eldridge joined Telegram, I will add you to the Sacramento River Watershed Project Telegram channel. It's a nice way We try to discourage just like extraneous socializing and chit chat, but it's a nice way that anyone puts a message up and everybody in the group sees it, can respond, as opposed to, I don't think any of us want hundreds of more emails to sift through and spam. It's a really great technology and encrypted.
So I want to reply to the pesticide piece, the toxic piece. So there's a couple of different groups I've used in my lectures with my kids in school. I just want to see if you guys are already in touch with these people. There's PAN, Pesticide Action Network. You might want to just take these names down just for a reference. They do a lot of great advocacy because I want to make certain we're all supporting each other and not duplicating too much. There's Environmental Working Group, EWG, and then Center for Food Safety. Those three come up first. So PAN is Pesticide Action Network, Environmental Working Group is EWG, and then Center for Food Safety. And so I pull lesson material from these groups when I give some of my classes. We do need down the road, we need to open up a charter school for activism because there are a lot of parents that are frustrated with all this, just this big eddy that their kids are immersed in school. And it's not really going, you know, eddies move, but they don't really go downstream. And there's so much data that just doesn't have relevance anymore. So a charter school for environmental activists would be awesome. And then
what was it? What was that third group? I'm sorry, I'm putting it in the chat as we speak. I did get the Pesticide Action Network and Environmental
Working Group and Center for Food Safety.
I get emails from all of them. I worked with them when I was working with the Guild on the GMO labeling bill.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you work with any people in Sonoma, Bob, when you're doing your Guild work?
Probably. I'm trying, you know, I couldn't tell you by name, but I know Sonoma has a great, they still had a great Occupy Sonoma.
Yeah.
They were like one of the last ones besides Sacramento, and they really shifted towards a lot of environmental actions and things like that. And they're still around doing a great job and doing workshops and things like that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then Xerxes Society is one more that does a lot of advocacy. Their specific focus is on pollinators, but of course they're doing a lot of legislative work on trying to get some of these pesticides removed.
Yeah, that's a good way. You have to work on multiple levels. I mean, I've lobbied before, you know, on so many issues. You also, and it's like what I said, city council, you know, board of supervisors, state legislators. You also have to, a lot of people forget, you don't just have to come to Sacramento, go to their district offices where you are a constituent. Yeah. And, you know, keep working on it.
Let's do this. I think what I'm hearing, and I will say we did work with Tora Rocha, who used to be managing the parks in Oakland, which is one of the first wildlife and biological refuges in California. But she used to be the administrator of Oakland Gardens. Anyway, she lives in Auburn now. But you know, she has a group called Pollinator Posse. We do consult with her on times, but again, so many people are doing so much, and life's kind of become a struggle for a lot of people that has been more challenging. But we have heard of the Xerxes Society. I would propose this, you know, in our effort right now as we build this out. You know, I love the fact that you're involved in education work too. So I think we should talk about, like, let's plan a meeting in a couple weeks, maybe right before New Year's and such, and let's try to get everyone maybe on a call together. And I would like to even potentially plan a date right now, and let's just try to drive all the organizations and people we would want to be on that call there. And if nothing else, it could be preparation for World Water Day broadcast, which we're going to do in March.
Sure.
And once people understand we have a World Water Channel, and we have a lot of things, and also that we play nicely in the sandbox with others. We're not trying to say we're the one organization doing it all. We have to build bridges.
Right.
And this is why regenerative culture is so important. We have to bring together all the little slices of the pie that we've been entrained and programmed in our society, that everything is different. You know, science has nothing to do with spirituality, which has nothing to do with environmentalism, which has nothing, you know, all these different things. And as we know, in a holistic, healthy society, in a regenerative community, all of these pieces play together. So I'm not sure if we could look down the road a couple of weeks and try to plan a time to try to do, you know, and maybe a weekend is better or an evening's better. But
can I share one poem in that synergistic flavor? Please. So this is a poem I wrote a couple months after George Floyd died.
Right.
And it's called I Can't Breathe.
Right.
That's the way it goes. America has a knee on her neck. Hopefully it'll be taken off before the country suffocates. The right to vote is our oxygen. Okay, so again, this synergy between environmental, mental health, and civil rights, right?
Mhm.
We have these interlocking principles that govern our lives, our health, our minds. Wake up, participate, and when we do build enough of these bridges, people look at each other, just like when you're in a community garden. And I've put in a bunch of gardens here in Sacramento, 4 school gardens, used to work in one of the community gardens. And you just look over and there's people across all ethnicities and all income levels, and we're all working together, right? We're all moving it forward.
Right.
So Bob, I'll send you a couple other poems. Mike, you have some
Perfect.
of mine already.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And let's do this. Let's get you on the Telegram channel. And I will say this, today's what, December 1st?
Yes.
I have to refer to my grounding element, Penelope over here. I do want to say hello. She's over there
Hi,
enjoying the
Penelope.
sunshine.
Hi,
And-
Penelope.
And she is really one of the foundational pieces of the work that we're actually planning to do over the next few years. And now that we have some high-level consultants and partnerships emerging, it's really exciting. But if today's the first, since it's a Wednesday, maybe what we could do, maybe in 2 Wednesdays from now, which would be the 15th,
Mhm.
let's try to organize. I don't know if it'd be best in the daytime or the evening, and I want to consult with Bob on his schedule. Let's try to do a Water Wednesday and make it all about the Sacramento River Watershed Project and see what kind of cohesive team we could build on. Because like I said, even with Sierra Streams, they're doing water testing all the time around the legacy of gold mining and
Mhm.
mercury and all these things. But I know as we bring in funding, there are people, I mean, I have to be honest, probably in the Watershed Project, we probably have about 20 people separate from all the organizations you mentioned, Harry, that we've engaged with, and we have roundtables. And as an event producer, I think we could do some really powerful stuff
Sure.
next year, especially since people are really right now feeling like a little bit helpless, and what can they do to make change? So does that work in 2 weeks from today, either on the 15th or the 22nd, that we do a
The
water?
15th works for me. And then I wanted to follow up. You had mentioned that, because I'd love to meet both of you personally. You had mentioned, Mike, that maybe the weekend of the 11th, I come up to Nevada City and say hello to you guys. Is that still on the
I'm in
table?
Sacramento. I
Oh,
probably,
Bob, you're here.
yeah, I'm in Northeast Sacramento. Yeah.
We're not far
You and I
away.
should grab coffee sometime and
Yeah.
go meet. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
at Del Paso and El Camino. Where are you
Oh,
at?
yeah. Not that far. I'm near Watton I-80, so we're pretty
Okay.
close. Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
I know where you are. Yeah.
All right.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you guys, since your neighbors, meet? Because I'll tell you the truth, I will continue to be present, but my attention and responsibility now is going towards realistically fundraising and holding the keel of the foundation even.
Okay.
And Bob is on the board, but
Mhm.
but part of when we talked about this stuff, Bob really can be, at least at this point, like the tip of the spear of the Sacramento River Watershed Project. And I
Sure.
will be dropping in, but right now he is actually the placeholder. And even though he'll help make decisions and do overviews for the board, we've talked about him really focusing on this project. There's so much groundwork that's been laid.
Mhm.
And also we have someone right now who wants to work on crowdfunding just around films around the Watershed Project. Richard Parisi, who's also a boat captain who lives in the Delta, close to Ileton area. And we are going to do water palooza in the Delta. So I'm just throwing it out. There's a lot of foundational work that's been done there. And let's find out what makes sense to build out this team. And on that, I think we're almost at the end of the call. And again, if Bob has any closing statements, and then we always like to go back to our guest, which is you, Harry, to any final thoughts before we finish.
Sure.
No, it's just I want to just piggyback a little bit on what Harry said about the importance of working together. And Michael, you said about, we collaborate with others. And what we want to do is we're looking to build bridges and to kind of close that gap, and where people feel that, geez, there's this problem and that problem, so many problems, what are you going to do? I always figure start where you are. Figure out a way to work together, get through the BS, of that you can, or the bureaucracy. And I like to cut right through the bureaucracy, because that's one of the main things that have kind of blocked people from being able to work together. Let's look at the problem, focus, and come from the solution to the problem instead of the other way around. And thank you, Harry, for everything you said. And I really look forward to working with you, meeting you, personally and everything like that. I mean, other than say on Zoom, but yeah, it's great. And I appreciate all the work that you've done over the years. So
thank you.
It's perfect.
Well, I'll close with this and just a couple more questions. Mike, you're still there, right?
Yes, sir.
Are there any land stewardship opportunities up in your neck of the woods right now, as far as gardens that need to go in, community gardens, or networking of any type?
Okay, currently right now I own 3 properties at the top of the Bear River Watershed.
Okay.
It's called Whispering Pines. The idea was to turn that into a sustainable food farm, B, a spiritual retreat center, and 3, an education center for regenerative education, which is again sustainability. I've been doing cover crops. I've been doing pollinator gardens. A lot of the mountain has burned over the years, so even though my place hasn't burned, I have a huge firewall from the river fire and the summit fire. So, but yes, we do have property, and I have currently a caretaker up there, and it's at the top of the Bear River Watershed, and I can see down into Colfax. I actually can look out and see Donner's Summit and Eagle's Head. So that property is there. It is private land right now, but I am open to and considering the idea of a trust. It's over 20 acres, and currently it used to operate as a cannabis farm, but we have 15,000 square feet of raised beds, and we really want to do something more around food security. And all of our wells are currently on solar and have perfect pH and no contaminants from the horrific legacy of gold mining.
Okay. And where I'm at here in North Sac, I was actually in Vermont for 2 months. I got back in mid-October. I hadn't been back to New England. I was up in the woods around Rutland. So my buddy, I'm doing a trade for my living accommodations here, putting in a garden for him. We're at 20 by 25. But if you guys know of any housing with progressive thinkers around here, keep me in mind, okay?
Definitely.
Because I want to move to a more permanent spot. And Bob, let's get together some point this week.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah.
I'm teaching PE. I'm still working that somatic weave with the kids, getting them into their bodies. I'm
Nice.
generally off work at 2:30.
Okay, not a problem. Maybe Friday.
Yeah.
And I would be as bold as this. I really love having this time with you, Harry. I don't usually roll out a red carpet. I think for Sacramento River Watershed Project, considering to have you as like the chairperson for education and educational programs. And I want to let you know, we also have a Water Protector magazine that's been done. So we are looking at different publishers. So again, there's a lot here, and this is what Bob and I have done in a few years together. And it's like, we took it as far as we could. And it's like, okay, well, the foundation is laid. So I'm just putting it out as an invite to continue to feel in about how to bring your talents and skill set to a round table and move things forward. And I just very honored to have time with you because there are a few elements to that. It's like setting up these, we actually have this whole idea of doing water protector programs, et cetera. Anyways, we'll talk more. But on that, I just want to thank both you and Bob for the time. And I want to thank Penelope Flores for being here today, helping us move things forward with Earthstock Foundation. There she is. With her dog,
Thank you,
Sandy.
Penelope.
Hi.
Thank you for being an anchor.
And Bob, would you mind giving me your cell so I have it as well?
Oh, sure.
All right,
916.
all right, I'm gonna stop the call, you guys, the recording, and then we can talk a little more. I just want to finish the actual broadcast.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.